I am Michael Lambert, a fellow in social inequalities at Lancaster University. Today I'm speaking about researching inequalities. So can I begin by asking, who are you?
I'm Andrew Sayer. I'm an Emeritus Professor of Social Theory and Political Economy at Lancaster University. I began my academic career at the University of Sussex in the 70s and then moved to Lancaster in 1993. And I guess inequality has been my main sort of substantive focus. First of all, it was mainly geographical inequalities between areas of cities, within cities, between regions, and internationally, and how those all fit together. But to do that, I had to get into political economy. And when I came to Lancaster, which at that time was very interested in spatial geographical inequalities, I found myself in the company of sociologists who were more interested in the cultural side of inequality. So I started thinking more about that as well and how to relate it to the structural inequalities that political economy emphasizes. So basically, that's who I am and how I got there.
So, I mean, inequalities being the central focus of your career, despite these kind of inter and post-disciplinary shifts that you sort of talked about. I mean, how, from a sort of a methodological, analytical point of view, how do you go about doing what you do?
Right. Well, I basically nurture hunches. Most of them turn out to be wrong usually, but some are right or nearly right. And working in a post-disciplinary way, which is something I've done since the 70s, you simply forget about disciplines. If you've got something you want to explain, you follow the connections wherever they lead. It doesn't mean being a jack of all trades and master of none sort of thing, because it takes a long time to get into understanding, say, how a labour market works or something like that. It's not just an economic thing. It's political and it's social, obviously. So, you know, football managers talk about making your own luck sometimes. And sometimes you can do that with serendipity, I think. You know, if you're really accustomed to scanning a lot of literature, all sorts of things will pop up which you weren't looking for, which you think, oh, that might help actually. And often that's worked. And so a lot of my work has been on philosophy. In fact, throughout, I suppose what I've been doing is creating dialogues between philosophy, first of all, philosophy of social science, methodology, and various social sciences. And later on, to do with ethics and normativity. That's kind of philosophical topic, but it's very relevant to social science as well. So I'm bringing them into a conversation, and usually I find both strengths and weaknesses on both sides, but often they can cancel each other out if you bring them together. So yeah, that's how I do it. I just basically read lots of things which capture my interest. And my school reports used to say I was easily distracted, and I still am. And it's outside school that proved to be quite useful.
So in effect, what you're trying to sort of suggest in a simplified way, bearing in mind the sort of the breadth and influence of the kind of work that you've done on inequalities in a range of facets, particularly in a method and social science, but also this idea of normativity and subjectivity and the felt inequalities of class, is that you're putting disciplines in conversation with one another and kind of facilitating that. And by the virtue of doing that, you're just following where the leads go in a very kind of, not haphazard, but purposeful, serendipitous way of where those kind of organic connections emerge.
Yes, although I'm trying to explain a particular thing, I don't just bring them together for the sake of it, you know. It's because I'm interested in, well, say 10 years ago, emotions. What are emotions, you know? And well, philosophers have some interesting things to say about that, and psychologists and sociologists do as well. And then latterly, I've realized that neuroscientists also say interesting things about it. And it's how to relate them. So many things are kind of multi-level, like inequality has a structural level embedded in things like division of labor and segregation within cities and school catchment areas. But it's also embodied in the way the dispositions we develop, how we relate to others, and how we understand ourselves and how we value ourselves relative to how we value others, and so on. So these are multi-level, and the connections between the level up and down, the structure and agency, basically, that continually having to think about.
So can I ask you to sort of push this a little bit further in thinking about the next question that I'm asking about, give me an example of how your work fits and relates to inequalities, given your kind of ongoing research in the subject?
Okay, I'm going to pick something I worked on around about 2007, 2008, contributive justice. And that's an unusual term. When people talk about justice and injustice, especially in philosophy and politics, it tends to be distributive. How much do people get? And if you think about across the social sciences, when they're talking about inequalities, that's the main thing they're interested in. What do they get in terms of resources, and also, you know, recognition, more recent kind of theme. But it's what people are able to contribute, or what they're required to contribute, particularly in terms of work, has a huge effect upon their lives and their character and so on, who they become. And so, you know, when we want to find out about someone, what they're like, we often are curious about what work they do. But contributive justice is about the inequalities in what people are allowed to do. And that depends upon the division of labor, basically. And we take this for granted, even in Marxism, you know, the division between different kinds of work is secondary, you know, to class, which is about property ownership in Marxism. So there are many everyday contexts, as I'm sure we all know, like in a household. Is everyone pulling their weight, doing what they can? Are they doing enough housework, so on? And then that's the quantitative side of contributive justice. How much are they contributing? And then there's the qualitative side. Is anyone hogging all the nice work and leaving all the rubbish tasks to someone else? Well, we can see the injustice of that, and lots of arguments within households, and especially to do with gender, are about those things, aren't they? But at the level of the social division of labor and labor markets and all that, there's this, we don't think about whether it's fair that some people get jobs where all the tasks are nice and skilled, and other jobs are tedious, unskilled, unrewarding, unfulfilling, maybe unpleasant, and maybe not very dignified. And that comes from how jobs are designed. So every time an organization creates jobs, it's creating contributive injustices usually. So I gave the example of academics. Should academics have to empty their own waste paper baskets? And I would say yes, rather than having someone else coming round doing it. And okay, well, I argue that ideally there should be a mix of tasks. So the unpleasant and pleasant tasks get shared out. We learn many skills and so on when we rotate. But obviously, you know, if you're going to have brain surgery, you don't want it to be done by someone who only does that one day a week, or, you know, because it takes a lot of time and skill. But nevertheless, it's contributive injustice and inequalities are hugely important in determining or influencing the quality of people's lives and what they are able to do. Can they really develop their potential or not? And I think it's much neglected, and it affects the kind of recognition you get, you know. So it seems that, you know, the doctor deserves more recognition than the cleaner, because they're doing something much more skilled and critical, if you like, for human well-being. But that's partly just how jobs are defined. We take them for granted that they're highly specialized. So a division of labor becomes a division of persons between, people who are getting nice jobs and people who are not. So that's an example, and it's multi-level. It relates to recognition. It relates to structures like division of labor. It relates to agency. What agency can people actually achieve?
I think that's a really good sort of material example as well about the kind of approach that you adopt always in trying to link these broader post-disciplinary discussions together around a concrete, solid example, and rather than thinking solely in the abstract, that kind of interrelationship, and trying to push beyond these kinds of contradictions and dichotomies. I think it's showcases what you do very well. Also, on a personal level, that distinction about doctors and cleaners rings very true from the work that I've done on the National Health Service, having interviewed a lot of people involved, and the idea that, during the 1970s and the early 1980s, particularly with industrial action, that one can't function without the other. And this kind of substituting role, it doesn't really work. So that's who you are, what you do, how you do it, and its relationship to inequalities. Can I ask about the kinds of other organizations, stakeholders, partners, and other bodies that you work with alongside or as part of in relation to your research?
Well, not much to say there, really. I mean, in my early career, I felt I was in a group of people working on similar things. We're all interested in political economy and cities and regions and stuff like that. And I've had some very rewarding partnerships for writing. So Kevin Morgan now at Cardiff University on uneven regional development, Richard Walker at Berkeley in California on divisions of labor, and a few others since then. But mainly I've worked independently. I suppose not many people want to do this strange business of post-disciplinary research, but I'm open to it. And it's a great way to work. It's very productive because you learn from others, and they save you a lot of time saying what's worth looking at and what isn't, and so on. But I'm very glad to be joining CASI because I really want to be part of a group that focuses on inequalities.
And I think there's no better way to finish than the kind of the positives of that kind of collegial involvement in a centre looking at this larger purpose.
I should say, though, I am retired now. So particularly when it's a nice day like today, I don't want to be working normally. So do other things, but I still want to keep my hand in and write occasional articles, and possibly they might become a book or something, but we'll see.
I don't think the centre is willing to let you go that quickly, so we'll be trying our best to hold on to that hand as far as we can.
All right. Thank you
very much.
Thank you, Michael. Cheers.